Hello, it's Adedoyin Jaiyesimi here, and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is the third module in the blueprint of executive communications bite-sized comms course, and I'm going to be speaking to you about thought leadership and executive visibility. Because when you are handling or managing executive communications, you actually have to understand thought leadership and executive visibility, because more likely than not, that is the strategy that you're going to have to use for your executive. I want to start off with the approach to thought leadership because, people think that thought leadership is, posting your executive, flying with private jets, first class with the premium prosecco, sparkling wine, and then giving one aspire to perspire quotes, sharp suit. That's not thought leadership. That's just vanity content. Thought leadership is credible information, valuable content, things that people can use, things that help people to say, oh wow, this has improved my knowledge and understanding. Your executive's unique voice and perspective on a matter, their voice on something that is happening, their take, their perspective. That is what thought leadership is about. So the goal of thought leadership should be to position your executive as a credible and leading voice. This person knows exactly what he is saying. It helps us to see the depth of their thinking, their intelligence level, their mastery of the finance sector, of the oil and gas sector, the genius that is, spearheading this organization. So it's not about posting random content. It's not about showing us your executive's lifestyle. It's nice. It's great content for like Instagram and TikTok, but that's not what makes your executive a thought leader. It's not about motivational quote, aspire to perspire. In fact, I think people are actually tired of motivational content. Well, are people tired? I don't know. Maybe people always need motivation, but the point is, it's not just about that. So you're taking us into your executive's mind. You're providing an opportunity for the target audience or stakeholder to get a professional glimpse of them. What is their insight? What is their thought about the Strait of Hormuz? What is the thought about the dynamics and the tensions, Iran and the US? What are the implications? Their thoughts about the direction of the tech landscape in Africa. Yeah, that's thought leadership. And you provide an opportunity for those audiences to benefit from the executive. So people should feel like, even though I don't have one-on-one access to this executive, by engaging with their content on LinkedIn, on Instagram, or YouTube, if we use this channel or podcast, I feel like I'm learning so much. I feel like I'm being mentored by them, because you know that people are mentored from afar. I feel like I'm being influenced by their content, their thinking. That's the way you should be thinking about it. And that's why thought leadership is an important strategy when you're doing executive communications. So how do you approach it? One, you have to identify themes, right? While it may be nice to see your executive flying premium to different locations, there needs to be depth, there needs to be substance. So when you're thinking about this with your executive, what is substance? What is the depth? In fact, if I were you, I would, when I'm doing my audit, I would see what are people saying within the industry. Are there opportunities or areas where I can carve out a unique perspective from my executive, so that they can talk about this area, they can speak to this. This is a pain point. This is content that will answer the needs of the target audience. This is something that will resonate. And you really have to do your research to be able to identify it. So what are the themes and topics around which your executive will share content? So you're able to see what are people currently saying, what unique perspective can my executive bring, and then we share content around that. And so you can go from very serious topics, so you're analyzing the trends within an industry, or light topics that simplify complex subject matter as well. So aim to create signature themes that can be linked to your executive and could potentially become a unique differentiator, because that is what it is. Thought leadership done well, your executive becomes top of mind for that particular topic, for that particular theme, for that particular industry, because they are adding value, because people love their insights. People are like, oh wow, I didn't see things like this. People love their analysis. Now, please know the themes and topics you choose should align with the areas of strength of your executive. Thought leadership is not meant to make them sound more or less intelligent than they actually are. I'll tell you a story of one of my early clients. It was the CEO of a particular organization, and I started engaging with him, and then I would do a lot of ghostwriting. So I'll just tell him that, okay, this is the content that, we're going to be posting, and I would write it. A lot of times he wouldn't even read it and write his speeches. And I think one of the days I had written a speech, and, was in the office, and he just said, okay, let me read through let me read through the speech before the engagement and just talk through a few things. And he just said, Adedoyin, this speech makes me sound more intelligent than I actually am. And I smiled when he said that, because that was good feedback for me to say, oh, how does this executive speak naturally or normally? And some of us may have experienced that, especially like for executives that have things ghostwritten for them, or maybe someone that has a book that was ghostwritten, and then maybe you read the book and you're like, oh my God, this person's mine. This person is very intellectual. And you not meet the person in person and you're like, are you the same person that actually wrote the book? Because their level of conversation doesn't match the level of thinking that you saw in the book. So you have to be very careful. This is not about making your executives sound more intelligent than they actually are, so that when people now meet them in person, or you put them on a stage or put them on a platform and people are underwhelmed and be like, oh my goodness, because the LinkedIn posts, the articles that set the bar really high. Don't do that. And then you also don't want a situation where you kind of dumb down the executives' intelligence through their posts, and when people meet them, are like, oh my God, you're actually more intelligent or more interesting or more intriguing than we see on social media. So there needs to be some sort of balance. Very, very important. Then you create your content calendar. So if you really want to do thought leadership well, you need to plan it. It has to be planned. It's not haphazard. It's not something you just go with the flow. Hardly would you be successful in executing thought leadership if you don't have a plan that you're working with. And so with your content calendar, like I said before, you identify the platforms, the formats, and it helps you to know when do we need to batch create content. So if you need your executive to be present for videos, for example, your content calendar helps you to know, okay, if we do a shoot day on Wednesday, are we shooting videos that will take us for 2 months, for example? And then that will be the content you will use. Are we going to use podcasts, and then we break it over different episodes? Because you're not going to be going to your executive and saying, oh, every week come and be recording. They don't have time. They may not even be in the country. So you think about it that way. And that's why your content calendars really help. And then you weigh your desired content against the social, environmental, and other social contexts. Very, very important. We can decide that, okay, we want to be talking about certain trends or certain policies, but something is happening within the country. Maybe a country is in mourning, key government personalities have died, or a tragedy happened. Then your executive is posting, it's not even acknowledging that something is happening in the country, is posting about something. That's being absolutely tone deaf, and you're going to set your executive off to be dragged, and it's not a good look. So even though you have your content calendar, please be mindful of whatever is happening, the backdrop. And sometimes depending on what is happening within that timing, maybe the particular topic is not a good topic for that particular season. So I remember this one was more for an organization, and they were going to do certain events in another country, and something had happened, and we just said, look, this event, it is not the right time to do the event, the mood in the nation, this is not, just wait. So they had to wait about 3 or 4 weeks for them to be able to do the event, so that they get the engagement that they need. But beyond that is how people would think about the organization, that this is what these ones just care about. They're not even caring about the way the country is, their customers, and all of that. So you really also want to, I just thought to also put that there. Now, with thought leadership, don't think that you have to do all of the work. You have to write the articles, you have to create the content. Of course, you have to put a good foundation, but you can really leverage industry events. And that's something that I really love doing when I was managing executive communications for CEOs, is to say, where can I plug this person's voice? Because for certain industries and sectors, there are things that happen quarterly. There are things that already happen yearly. So how do I profile and position that executive? Because those platforms in and of themselves attribute a level of credibility. If my executive can be a keynote speaker, if my executive can be speaking on a panel, if my executive can just feature in one way or the other. And so you target those things, and in advance. So if I were you, for your industry and your sector, I will go and get a calendar and know the events that from January to December, these are the events. And don't only target big events. So small summits, stakeholder events, roundtables, to the big, maybe annual conference and whatnot. Put it there. And you also, depending again on the aspirations, don't just focus on your country. You also want to think Africa, you want to think global. I love thinking Africa and thinking global, because why do you want to limit your CEO and executives to just being local champions, right? The world is a global village. So think about it and create that calendar, and then start seeing how you can begin to pitch your executives to speak on those platforms. So which is why I said you still have to do the work. So if you go and pitch them and they now check out your executive executive online, what is the footprint they're going to see? What are the things that are going to make them say, oh, okay, we want this voice on our platform? So one of the fastest ways to build thought leadership is to leverage industry events where the executive can speak, be seen, and have an opportunity to connect. So it is your duty to be able to spot those events. And what I used to do is connect with the organizers or people that work in comms in those spaces. I kind of do my investigation. How do they select the speakers? When do they select the speakers? If an event is happening next month, it's not now that they will have already decided on the speakers. It's maybe if somebody decides maybe they're not coming, that's when they will now have backup speakers. But there are some events that for the main list of speakers, they have backup of the backup. So some of these conversations happen a year in advance. So if there's an industry event that maybe is happening next month, start positioning your executive to be able to speak next year, that kind of thing. So you really have to think ahead. So industry events, they give you valuable content, videos, pictures, and then you kind of capture your executive engaging with multiple stakeholders, the brand association, top notch when it is done well, because you show your executive outside of their corporate setting. Now, in terms of executive visibility, this has to do with media interviews. Now, media interviews are great because we get to hear from your executive. They get to be profiled or platformed on a media stage or an interview media platform where they're sharing the key messages of the organization. They're talking about their particular area of expertise. I have an example of an executive that I coached for just a brief media training, and they went to talk about a particular topic on CNBC that had to do with their particular sector. And in that, I was just so proud, just even listening to her, just sharing her expertise on that particular sector as a voice within that space. It was really, really good. So it can be a credible boost. And what the organization did was took out that interview and put it on their social media platforms, because it was such a great boost, not just for the CEO, but also for the company, which is what I'm saying, that there's usually alignment. Now, I know I've said it before, but I'll say it again. Before you put your executive forward for media interview, please, they need to be media trained, because if they're not media trained, it can backfire. They can say the wrong things, they can behave the wrong ways, they can do the wrong things that then distract. So your executive is actually intelligent, they actually have knowledge. Then imagine they just say something that they're not meant to say in the interview, and then once and especially if it's a live interview, once that bad thing has come out, you cannot erase it. So please make sure that they are media trained. And if they say, oh, I don't need media training, look, I've done this media training now for the last 7 years. And sometimes you have executives that come and say, oh, I speak well, I'm articulate. I just tell them, it's not about how articulate you are. It's about understanding the dynamics of a media interview. And I play videos for them and say, you don't want to be this person, right? And helping them to understand the consequences of not being media trained. So media interviews, they're great to amplify your brand messaging, you increase executive visibility, but they can cause a lot of damage if the executive is not well prepared. So what should you do? Make sure you research the media platform well. Where possible, research the presenter and journalist. So the executive that was on CNBC, for example, when she told me about it, I said, okay, which of the shows are you going on? What time? Who is going to be interviewing? She had mentioned somebody, but it ended up being another person that joined it, but it still worked out well because it wasn't a hostile interview. And it is important for you to know who is going to be interviewing them so that you can go and see their style of interview. Some journalists have a hostile style of interview. Some journalists like to bait their speakers, while some interviewers, some journalists, they're very like cool. They just want to get to the facts and they're highly professional. Not everyone. So you need to know. So when she told me who it was, I went to go and watch past interviews that they had done just to see the style, how they engage with the speaker or the person that is speaking, their style. And I said, okay, this is actually cool. It's not hostile. It's not antagonistic. It's just there was you could tell that this person has respect for the professional that is coming on board to give their professional expertise and all of that. So, and even though it was a different person that ended up taking the interview, it still worked out well because during the training I still prepared her. Again, you have to be able to prepare your executive for whatever scenario. I said, look, this is what you should do. If they ask you this question, you don't know the answer. This is what you should say. Don't go and use these words. Don't repeat this. Don't add it. And it was a crash course for this particular executive, but she really, really handled it well. So research the media platform, research the presenter or the journalist, note their style of conversation and questioning. So let that form part of media training. If your executive has not been media trained before, you need to do scenarios. They need to sit down in front of a camera. You need to record them. You need to get them to answer some questions, play it back, because some of them have interesting facial expressions that don't look great on TV. But yeah, this is not a media training module, but it's important. So be clear on the angle and direction for the interview. Your executives should have an idea of what to expect. While they may not be able to have all the questions, and even if the journalist or presenter sends you all the questions, they can still ask you a question that is not on the list. So you should be prepared for that. And then plan media training for your executive. Give them the do's and don'ts for the media interviews. Give talking points. Now, talking points, you should always create talking points whenever your executive is speaking on any platform. So they're going for a speaking engagement, industry event. You do your research. What are the talking points? What are you going to zero on? What is the theme? What are the things they're going to say? Remember the key messages. You align with the key messages you've decided for the executive that ties with the organization's key messages. So always have the talking points. So before your executive goes out to speak, that briefing needs to be done, like non-negotiable. I don't even, when I have like executive clients, I don't negotiate. We get on a call. There's one, we went to, was it Abeokuta? And the day before the engagement, we ran through the talking points. On the way to Abeokuta, we ran through the talking points, and the person did really well. Again, these things are planned. They are deliberate and intentional. So you prepare briefing notes, timing, location, so they come on time. Your executive cannot be arriving at the studio for a live interview 5 minutes after, or even right at the time. They have to come before, because they're going to be mic'd. It's a live show. People are watching. They're expecting that your executive will come and speak at a certain time. So there's timing around all of these things. What to wear. This is very, very important. You don't want, if there's going to be a green screen, then your executive wears a green dress or green suit, and they blend to the background. This is why, okay, you check in as well with the media. It doesn't have to just be a media interview. It can even be just a recording, whatever it is. Just advice on what to wear so that they look their best, and then any other information that they will need to make sure that that engagement is successful, because it's video. Very, very, very important. After the interview, and I love doing this, do a review of the executive performance, highlighting what went well and what can be improved. So what I usually do is watch the playback. So sometimes maybe they're speaking in an event, maybe a conference, and then we watch the replay. I first ask them, so how did you feel about that? Watch it again. What do you think? And then I get them to first critique themselves, because honestly, sometimes it can be daunting to give an executive feedback, but let them even start. So I get them to start based on, maybe because I come in as an advisor, I'm someone external, and I usually get them to trust me as well, because that's also important. But I get them to do that review, and then I now give my comments, what worked, what didn't work, and what can be improved upon. So here are some general social media management tips. Draft post in the executive's authentic voice. It means studying. You really have to study the executive. And this is something that I learned when I was managing communications for two pastors within a faith-based setting, is to be able to write in their own unique voice. So I had to really deep dive myself in their messages, their books, and all of that. For you, with your CEO, if your CEO doesn't say a lot, and your CEO doesn't have a lot of content, it can be like, but you just have to learn, how does the CEO speak, right? And so where they do have speaking engagement, pay attention. You can play it over and over again. What are the words that they like to use? Because you want to be able to replicate that on social media. Respond to thoughtful comment. I think that it's a great strategy to make sure that you respond to comments rather than ignore them. I know sometimes some comments can be a lot, so even if it's just a like. And then be careful about commenting on sensitive and political issues. Very, very important. Again, you don't want to set your executive up for dragging and unnecessary negative attention. Don't respond to negative comments emotionally or engage with trolls. Never a good idea. They have nothing to lose. You have everything to lose if you try that. Monitor sentiment, flag issues, right? So sometimes when you're doing your media monitoring, just seeing even the kinds of comments that people are making, it's usually very, very good. And then don't be silent during major industry moments. So a milestone is happening within the industry, your CEO should be speaking. Your whether is to congratulate maybe the regulatory body achieved a milestone, whatever it is, because again, you want to be a thought leader, you want to be top of mind. So they your executives should have something that they want to say. Now, you can draft something, get their permission, and then post it, because those are the things, because they're milestone moments, right? They then help you to ride on the visibility of those moments when you say the right things and key into it. So here are just a few tips for successful thought leadership. I can give you a lot of tips, but yeah, I don't want this to be too long. But focus on clear themes, right? Have your well-defined themes that align with your executive expertise, your organization strategy, the broader issues shaping the industry. Please don't get your executive to speak about everything. If I were you, I'll just focus on 2 or 3 themes that you can drill down to, narrow down into, get your executive's unique perspective on those themes. Aim for authenticity. Authenticity, it helps to build credibility, and credibility is the currency of thought leadership. People must be like, yes, this is a trusted voice. This is a voice that knows what they're saying. When leaders speak from experience and share lessons learned, thought leadership becomes more effective. Now, sometimes the conversation is how open and how vulnerable should this executive be. We're not saying that you should post everything about the life of the executive, but you want them to be human as they can be. Let us see your human side. Let us see when you've made a mistake. You're not trying to paint a perfect picture. You're not trying to say that your executive has it all together. But in sharing the not so perfect times, you also have to be careful. Don't overshare. I think that's the point that I'm trying to make. And then be driven by insight. So strong thought leadership is driven by insight. So if you're going to be doing it on behalf of your executive, that means you have to be reading. You two will now become an expert in that topic area, right? But you have to spend time engaging with the trends, data, have an understanding of the forces shaping the future. So those are just some of the things that you should bear in mind when developing thought leadership, managing social media, and then leveraging media interviews for executive visibility. We have one more module in this course. I hope that this has been valuable so far. Please share with me in the comments what you are learning. If there's still things that you still want me to touch on, because this is such a broad and wide topic, please put it in the chat section, and then I will see if I can still create some content around it. But I would really love to hear from you and have your feedback. But see you in the 4th and final module. Bye.